Apologies, I didn't see your hand. So last week I brought us into an introduction to a new series entitled Breathing Underwater, written by Richard Rohr. And the book is taking a deeper dive into the spirituality of the 12 steps. And, his whole premise is if you are in this earthly experience, that you are experiencing something that might be unmanageable, that be it, you could take out the word alcohol, it could be a certain pattern, stinking thinking, and so on, and we will look at that a little bit further. But that invitation to look ever so deeply at the essence and to bring us even closer to that mystery of the divine and into our true essence, all for the power of transforming our lives and knowing the joy of our being in the midst of trials and tribulations that we experience on this earthly journey. So before we get into step one, I'd like to share a poem with you entitled Paradox, written by Gunilla Norris. So I invite you to, it's on the screen, but first go around. I'm just going to ask you to close your eyes and take it in and see what speaks to you. And then I'm going to give you a moment to look at it, okay? It is a paradox that we encounter so much internal noise when we first try to sit in silence. It is a paradox that experiencing pain releases pain. It is a paradox that keeping still can lead us so fully into life and being. Oh, our intellectual minds do not like paradox. We want things to be clear so we can maintain our illusions of safety. Certainty breeds tremendous smugness. We each possess a deeper level of being, however, which loves paradox. It knows that summer is already growing like a seed in the depth of winter. It knows that the moment we are born, we begin to die. It knows that all of life shimmers in shades of becoming. That shadow and light are always together, the visible mingled with the invisible. When we sit in stillness, we are profoundly active. Keeping silent, we hear the roar of existence. And through our willingness to be the one we are, we become one with everything. So I invite you to now take a look at the poem and just reflect. Which paradox is wanting to be embraced more fully by you? And if you'd like to put that in the chat, you may. If anybody would like to share, I invite you into that. No musts in doing that. You can keep that within the confines of your own heart. Anything in the chat, Matt? Okay, so we're going to let this percolate, right? So another paradox that we will explore this morning is the paradox of, in admitting my powerlessness, it is only then that I truly know power. And as the Apostle Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians, chapter 12, verse 10, for when I am weak, then I am strong. That is the essence of the first step of the 12-step program, or the 12-step journey, which is an ongoing thing. You don't just tick them off and you're done, right? It's a lifelong spiritual journey. But before we dive into the essence of the first step, I wanted to review what is paradox. We've spoken about that when we were focusing on our power of order, right? Finding that the balance of the consciousness of a both end and navigating between two poles or two seemingly contradictory ideas. And then the other paradox, there's so many in the spiritual journey, is I just want to lay the groundwork of how we're defining God. Many of you, we've done this before, but I would like you to know how Richard Rohr is defining it, because sometimes the language in the book, it was first written, I think, in 2011, and in his language has evolved, but his concept sometimes does not, our language can fail us. So first, let's look at paradox. According to Charles Fillmore, he says the key to understanding the concept of paradox is learning to acknowledge and accept the apparent opposites as being two aspects of one complete idea, instead of the dualistic mind that wants to categorize them as separate. And when Sesame Street, or was it Electric Company? I don't remember. It's been a long time since my kids were young. One of these things is not like the other, so to speak, right? Instead of seeing how they are connected, right? So they are actually complements, and that they must coexist on our spiritual journey, like light and dark, and the divine feminine and the divine masculine, right? And we're going to see so many more. And a paradox cannot be understood with our intellectual mind. We are required to go deeper within and make conscious contact with our divine self, which is always knowing its oneness with the mystery we call God. And we don't like surrendering to mystery. We like to have things all in a neat box. Anybody? How many of you like the unknown? Sometimes, maybe, right? And it invites us, instead of trying to solve things, but to live in the question of, rather than trying to control and hold the tension between of many concepts and ideas. And so let us look at the paradox of God itself, right? The mystery. No matter how we try to humanly define, our words fail us. And we see the evolution of the concept of God through time, because we as humankind have evolved in consciousness. We have moved away from just seeing things literally, right? We all want to put things in a night. Well, let's describe God. So, I know what it is to be powerful, and so let's make God in our image and just times everything we can do by 10, and that's God in the sky, right? Trying to make sense of our world. But God is that mystery. It is not some bearded dude in the sky. You're invited to believe that. I'm just laying the groundwork of, the unity teachings, metaphysical teachings, and then also the teachings that Richard Rohr share with us, which invites us into that mystical experience. So we see God is impersonal yet personal, meaning God is not, according to Eric Butterworth, God is not a person, but yet God is personal. I remember sitting on my deck one day in meditation, and I just felt everything, just the stillness and the silence, everything melted away. This was last year. And right before me, I heard this buzzing. And I opened my eyes. The feeder was way over here. There was a hummingbird right here. And I felt one with this hummingbird. There was no separation. I began to giggle, and it stayed. And I just sat in the stillness. It was probably 30 seconds, but it was incredible. That was a tangible, personal experience. When Eileen's on the beach, maybe looking at the sunset like she loves to do and the sunrise, she may not be able to put into words that personal experience of the divine, that encounter she's having in that moment. And so God is also immanent and transcendent, meaning that everything that is alive is of the essence of God, but yet it is beyond all of us. It is an expansive energy of movement and change, and my words fail. And so Richard Rohr, although he may use some of the, like I said, older language, his understanding or how he tries to put into words that which is mystery is the all-encompassing presence. It is the ground of our being rather than a being itself. It is the source of all life, which is in alignment with Emily Cady's definition, the author of Lessons in Truth. It is flow of energy, of love, and of grace. And so now, as we know this, let us step into, I didn't mean, it's just things just work. Step one. And so step one is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. Here it's dependencies. It could be food. It could be stinking thinking. It could be codependency. It could be procrastination. It could be control, perfectionism. You get the picture, right? That our lives, let's do this again. We admitted that we were powerless over our attachments, that our lives had become unmanageable. And as the Apostle Paul says in Romans chapter 7, verses 15 through 18, I cannot understand my own behavior. I fail to carry out the very thing I want to do and find myself doing the very thing I hate. For all the will to do what is good is in me, the performance is not. How many of you can relate to Paul? Maybe you use different language, right? We get in our own way. I'll start that nutritional plan Monday. I have gotten intuition. Now, I calculate points on Weight Watchers. I don't eat too much during the day. But my intuition was telling me to follow an anti-inflammatory cleanse. I spent the money on the kit. It's sitting there for 6 months. I don't know. I know why. The intellect, and it's part of what we're going to explore. And so I'm asking you, as we go on this journey, fill in your blank as to what you're being asked that you are powerless over. What's unmanageable? What is the cause of suffering? Something you can't seem to control, that you might change the furniture on the deck of the Titanic, so to speak, but only find you're sinking in the same way. something showing up over and over. This is not to beat yourself up. We are all walking this journey together. This is about ahas. This is about embracing ourselves with compassion, yet also being willing to step out and transform. So I want to talk about the paradox of powerlessness. Hey, don't we talk about our 12 spiritual powers? Our power of strength. We have the power to stand steady, courageous, ready to do the unsurmountable. Yes, right? We have that power within us. Or a power of power. Our ability to be confident, to have dominion over our thoughts, our actions. So what's up with this? You want me to say I'm powerless, and the Unity teacher says, become empowered. So what we are looking at here is going into another paradox. We are in the daily word, human and divine. We live in this world but are not of this world. Another way of saying our humanity and divinity, we can be our ego and our domesticated self, or as Thomas Merton, which is language that Richard Rohr uses, he was very influenced by the Trappist monk Thomas Merton, is true self, false self. True self, false self. So they're all different ways. So it is our false self that is powerless. And so we must reach deeper within to that which is greater. Last night when James Van Praagh was here and he was doing a reading, he several times would say, wait a minute, and he'd close his eyes, and then he would listen. He wouldn't look out here for the answer. He would delve within, navigating our human self, knowing the who from the what of us, as Charles Fillmore would say. And so how Carolyn Myss would speak of the ego, false self, personality self, she says this: the ego is always frightened and cannot discern a blessing from a tragedy, because its only compass is its own survival. As a result, it bases every decision on either what it already knows and it's familiar with, or what it views as safe. Times of change are about exactly that, a need to change. But change of circumstances are the illusion, not the intent. You are always the object of change, never your situation. Let me repeat that. You are always the object of change, never your situation. When life presents you with a crossroads and you are not sure what to do, the ego will always fall back on what it has already done. The ego pulls out its resume, which is paradoxically exactly the wrong thing to do. Doing the same thing over and over again, isn't that another slogan? And expecting a different result. Change arrives because you need to move forward, not retreat to the past. So again, why is it difficult? Because sometimes we just want that feeling in a world that's filled of change are go-to ways that bring us comfort. So even though I may not eat a lot, the sourdough bread that agrees with me and it counts and is legal on Weight Watchers can be causing inflammation in my body. Right? I know it. And admitting it now in front of all of you, you can ask me if I started my cleanse for my own good. And so here I would like to go to, you're always the object of change, never your situation. Now, it doesn't mean that you never leave an unhealthy situation, especially those that are volatile or unsafe, right? I want to talk about the difference, well, let me backtrack. So, example, I was teaching and we got a new director of special services. And let's just say her integrity and mine, or what I felt was right for the students and how she did, were not in alignment. And then a program that I had been running for a while, she had hired a good buddy of hers that she brought with her, who was a teacher, and she gave my program after me being there. At the time, it was like 20 years, and it took a while to get to that program to this woman, right? I think I felt a little victimhood, just a tad. Did I think it was unjust, unfair? Yes. And I was already feeling the call, like, don't like a lot of things, like, I'm out of here. I gotta find something new. And then a little voice came inside and says, well, let's see what you can do to empower yourself, but before you try to change the chairs on the Titanic, maybe, let's do some inner reflection. And so I began looking, what did this symbolize? What clarity was coming? I began to do some forgiveness work instead of casting this judgment on this woman who I knew nothing about. And there were some things that were challenging. And lo and behold, this opening happened, and even in the midst of the challenge, I all of a sudden became a confidant to this woman. She was going through some very challenging times. And then she said to me one day, you have every reason to not like me. She says, but you're probably one of the kindest persons here in this building to me. Do you think that transformed me and her? I didn't know where it was going to go. And as the universe would have it, they moved her out of my classroom and I got my program back the next year, and I didn't have to do a damn thing, but I did. Let me change that. Of my false self, what would I have done? Wrote a letter of complaint, talk about how it wasn't fair, right? Like, take my toys and go home. Eventually it wasn't the place for me. But in doing that work, not only did it open up a space, who knows, right? Maybe this whole thing was about me being present to her and her having a different experience. Who knows? Or me too. Knowing that, surrendering to that from within and going within, and not knowing I am not a victim of this world I see, brought about that inner transformation. So what is it for you that's being called for? What are you admitting is powerless and then looking for that inner transformation rather than the outer fix? And again, I'm not saying you never change an unhealthy situation. So I want to take a look at, how do you do that discerning of the ego, knowing when your false self is in charge versus your true self, that which is always receiving, intuiting, in connection. We're always connected. The ego is just blind to it, to the divine, right? And probably many of these, but I thought it would be good to review. So the ego is externally focused while the true self is internally focused. It will always look outside to the ego to who is to blame, what do I need to change, who's at fault, what's going to give me the next, what's going to solve my problems out there. And then, whereas it's internally rooted for the true self. Fear-based versus love-based, okay? And I don't mean love like, ooh, I like what happened to me that year. But no, who am I going to be? I'm going to align myself from my highest truth, right? Because that is our power of love, to harmonize and synchronize from the highest place in consciousness we can to be the highest aspect of our beingness. Being reactive, going within, centering, being the calm presence. Intellectual reasoning versus intuiting. Control versus allowing. Attachment, needing to have things a certain way, I can only see it my way, or allowing, oh my gosh, there's something here for me to know. Competitive versus inclusive, me versus everybody. What's in it for me would be the ego's voice, or how? I wonder what I'm being called to do, that only, maybe not just in appearance, but for the greater good of our souls, is for the highest good of all. And the ego, again, is about survival. It fears death, right? Because it wants to keep us safe. But I mean death also in the sense of dying to the old so that we can be transformed. And the true self knows that he's eternal, that we're constantly dying, not just, in our experience in consciousness, but even if when we leave this physical world, that we are eternal. And so here we find in John chapter 12, verse 24, where the master teacher Jesus is believed to be, has spoken, "Very truly I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit." That mustard seed represents metaphysically that which is the past, the old, the false self. Of myself, my false self, I am powerless. I am going to surrender this. I'm going to let go of this. I'm trusting that something that I'm going to be embraced, and we'll move into the other, so that in its dying, new life comes. How many of you went through a challenging situation only years later, or even months later, to say, oh my gosh, so many blessings came from that? Right? That's what that says. And so as we come to a close this morning, step one, we admitted we were powerless over our whatever you want to put in there for you. Addiction, attachment, patterns, stories, thinking, that our lives had become unmanageable. In order to embrace this step, we need to be courageously aware and honest. And in summary, the awareness of what is unmanageable, really be honest. Why do I do that which I don't want? Instead of getting an analysis, if that's happening, the false self just might be in charge here. Experience the same situations, patterns that cause me distress and suffering, right? I change the situation, but I have the same kind of experience or the same type of pattern in a person or a relationship, or the same illness constantly. Now, this is, again, not showing up. And then awareness of my ego's sly ways of managing my life. Is that sour bread really the thing that's going to make me feel good in the long run? I doubt not. It does taste good, but... And of my false self, ego, I am powerless. willing to die to the false, to the past, to what has limited us, willing to be changed from within. The journey is more than manifesting our parking spaces, right? The next job, that is important. But if you're not saying, what is it that I'm being asked to surrender or step into? True transformation. And again, we are on this lifelong journey, and it's about being compassionate with ourselves. And it calls us to surrender to the mystery. And I close with these words by Richard Rohr, and then we lead into meditation. As many teachers of the 12 steps have said, the first step is probably the hardest, the most denied, and the most avoided. So, the whole process never takes off to some. No one likes to die to who they think they are, for their false self is all they have, they believe, as Trappist monk and spiritual writer Thomas Merton wrote in New Seeds of Contemplation. Letting go is not in anybody's program or the false self's program for happiness, and yet all mature spirituality, in one sense or another, is about letting go and unlearning. What the ego hates more than anything else in the world is to change, even when the present situation is not working or is horrible. Instead, we do more and more of what does not work, as many others have rightly said about addicts. And I would say about all of us. The reason we do anything one more time is because the last time did not really satisfy us deeply, according to the false self. As the English poet W.H. Auden put it, we would rather be ruined than changed. We would rather die in our dread than climb the cross of the moment and let our illusions die. So, my friends, where are you being called to be honest and courageous and admitting? What is it that your false self is powerless over in your life? And so let us take that within as we begin to become aware of our breath, being present in our awareness, sensing the inhalation and the exhalation. And beginning that journey of going within, having the desire to dissolve into our true essence, into being held by the mystery, the God of our understanding, the God that cannot be contained by words or descriptions. And breathing in and breathing out, being aware of your heartbeat, your human heartbeat, the preciousness of the wisdom of the heart. Between each heartbeat is a pause. And what a beautiful metaphor It calls us to pause. As we are experiencing the world around us with our physical eyes, with our intellect, with all of our senses, let us pause. Let us enter into the stillness of our divine self, our true self that knows oneness. It is only calling upon that all-knowing wisdom that we can walk the mystery of the paradoxes, to be walking with human feet, but being guided by divine light, wisdom, life, love. And so as I step out in faith, in courage, and honesty, let me surrender my false self. I thank you for all the ways you have tried to protect me, all the ways you tried to provide a minute of safety or false control. I thank you. But I am surrendering to that which is greater, that which is mysterious. Oh, of myself I am powerless, and so let me let go and be embraced by the mystery. For it is only then that I know true power, as I rest in the stillness. Becoming aware of the breath that breathes us, that is the essence of us. Let us go forth in courage, in honesty, strength, and love that emanates from our true selves. Let us be open to being transformed anew. And so it is. And so it shall be, as we say together, Amen. And sensing your body now, perhaps rubbing your hands on the sides of your arms, embracing yourself in all your totality, saying the words, I love you, and then holding your hands out and beholding the light that each one of us are. Namaste. Have a blessed day and week, and now